Hi everyone, this is Chris Craig with Unanet, and this webinar is how will your organization benefit from a single source of truth for projects, people, and financials. We'll give it another 30 seconds and then we'll go ahead and get started. Thank you. All right, we'll go ahead and get started. Again, my name is Chris Craig. I'm with Unanet, and this webinar is how will your organization benefit from a single source of truth for projects, people, and financials. And just a few logistics before we dive in. We have a brief PowerPoint overview on Unanet as a company, who we are, what we do, where we fit. We've always found that if we make these webinars as interactive as possible, they're more compelling for the audience. So there is a question section in the GoToWebinar console. If you click on the orange arrow, it will hide the control panel or show the control panel. So if you show the control panel, if you look near the bottom, you'll see a question section. You can open up that question section and submit questions in there. And I will periodically go over and answer those. And if you have a question, it probably means somebody else has a question. So please feel free to submit those over the course of the next hour. And then also, if you're experiencing any latency with what we're talking about with the audio and what the screens are showing, the easiest way is to simply rejoin the webinar. So if your GoToWebinar is pretty stable, but for whatever reason you're experiencing any issues with the system, just try to rejoin, and that's probably the quickest, most effective way to resume the webinar. All right, so how will your organization benefit from a single source of truth? One of our customers sent me this graphic. It's a CFO of one of our clients, and it's very simplistic, but I think it's also very powerful. They were running a legacy system through 2015, excuse me, and then they implemented Unanet mid-2016. So you can see that they've been able to significantly scale their business without adding additional headcount in the finance team and the admin team. And he kind of sent me this out of the blue, and I thought it was again, very simplistic, but also very powerful, very compelling as to the case for a single source of truth. So again, just going over on Unanet, who we are, what we do, where we fit. Unanet is one platform that our customers utilize to do all the functions you see on the screen here. So, and I'll go through this when we get into the software, but the planning area allows you to look out into the future and plan people, plan expenses into the future, and then look at a variety of dashboards and reports that answer questions about the future, such as who is overbooked, who is underbooked, when do resources become available, when do people with specific skills become available, are jobs adequately staffed into the future, what is the revenue forecast into the future. You can apply probability percentages or P-wins to these opportunities, and then you can run your forecast using an expected value calculation or a weighted forecast based on the probability percentage. You can do plan sets and scenario planning, based on whether we do this with project with all employees versus 50% employees, 50% subcontractors. What's the impact on margin? What's the impact on schedule? You can do your pricing in Unanet, your forward pricing. So that's kind of the planning area. The executing area is kind of the core blocking and tackling for professional services organizations. So time tracking, time sheets, expense reports with the per diems, approval workflow around that information, purchase orders. So we have, purchase requisitions, purchase orders, and then approval workflow around all of those. There's a notes feature where you can attach documents within Unanet, and you can also run a variety of reports on contract backlog, contract management, etc. The monitor area gets into all the analytics around the data in Unanet. So it's all real time. It's all live data on burn rate, comparing actual to budgeted numbers, gross margin reports, net margin reports, percent complete reports, reports on utilization. And there's obviously different ways different organizations define utilization, and we can walk through how those definitions are set. The fourth area is billing and recognizing revenue. So for our customers, billing is an important factor because they're doing all the work, they're planning all the work, they need to bill for all the work. So billing for time and materials, fixed price, and cost plus type engagements, and then the various ways you can recognize revenue for those engagements. And then finally, the accounting. So the full general ledger, chart of accounts, accounts payable, accounts receivable, the cost pool calculation. So actually calculating the indirect rates based on your chart of accounts hierarchy for your cost pool hierarchy. So this is kind of again, a high level overview of what our software does, and it does all of these things in one system, one database. So oftentimes we'll talk to companies and they'll be running QuickBooks as a general ledger, and they'll have a third-party timesheet and another third-party expense report, and they'll be using some type of budgeting tool. And oh, by the way, they'll have 8 or 9 Excel spreadsheets on their desk open at all times. So Unanet kind of consolidates all of that disparate information into one single source of truth. So that's kind of the central focus of this first column here. Current is that since Unanet is central, everything's real time, it's all live data. So again, as soon as people are entering time on the timesheet, project managers can see the impact of the time against their budget, against their margin. So it's all live, real-time data. It's very intuitive. We'll show you that when we get into the software. It's web-based, so I'd say 95% of our new customers now are opting for the cloud option, where we're hosting the software for them. The functionality is exactly the same, whether it's cloud or on-premise. It's just where the server resides. If we are hosting it for them, it's at Amazon Web Services, US East, in a FedRAMP moderate environment. We've achieved SOC 2 compliance from a security perspective. It's also very efficient. So we talked about earlier the slide the customer sent on being able to scale while keeping your G&A lower. And then being able to look out into the future. So being able to make decisions based on the future. So not just, we always say you cannot drive your business by looking in the rearview mirror. You have to look forward and make decisions. So that's what Unanet allows you to do. All right, we have over 1,200 clients now, and really the common thread across all of those clients isn't really the size of the organization. It's really, are they project-driven organizations? So in many cases, multiple people are working on multiple projects. You can see the size of the organization on this slide in the left-hand side of the y-axis, but people always ask me, what's your, what size organization would use Unanet? We have some people that have 3 employees, and we have, some customers, several customers that are well above 1,000 employees. So it really varies. It really depends on, are they project-driven type organizations where they're into looking at the metrics for everything we just described, and also, people are a big component of what their workforce is. So it's not so much for distribution or hospitality or banking or different industries. It's really those project-driven industries. We've been in production for over 20 years now. We're the highest rated project-based ERP on G2 Crowd, which is a Gartner-like site for evaluating software packages. We're a top workplace award by the Washington Post the last 3 years. We have a nationwide network of partners that not only recommend the software, but in some cases implement the software if they're certified on it, or operate the software in an outsourced accounting model for some of our customers. All of our software is 100% developed and supported in the United States. So, everything is developed in Dulles, Virginia. All of our support is out of Dulles, Virginia, or Denver, Colorado. We've made the Inc. 5000 list the last 3 years. I'm sorry. We've made the Inc. 5000 list. It was the first year we nominated for it, but it's based on your compounded annual growth rate over the last 3 years. And then we're self-funded, we're profitable, we have no debt on our balance sheet, so it's really the customers are driving the product roadmap. Speaking of customers, we really are a customer-centric organization. So in addition to the software, we have a variety of capabilities that ensure customer success and desired outcomes around the software. So first of all, we have a professional services team that works with all of our customers to get them up and running, configured correctly, trained on how to use the software, integrated with third-party systems. They migrate all the legacy data for our customers. So professional services works with our customers up to the point of go live. And then upon go live, they're transitioned to the customer success team. So customer success is working with our customers in a proactive manner to ensure Unanet is delivering upon their desired outcomes, and basically conducting webinars for the customers, reaching out to the customers to schedule account reviews, etc. We also have a customer support team that's more reactive. So whereas success is more proactive, support is more reactive, fielding questions, phone and email questions on how do I get a report to display a certain value, or why isn't this transaction showing up in my trial balance, or something like that. So our support team, again, is in Dulles, Virginia, and Denver, Colorado. That's kind of a high-level overview on Unanet's capabilities. We also have some self-service functionality that is all publicly available. We have help documentation on the software that's genuinely helpful. We have a knowledge center that's best practices that have been submitted by other customers. We do regional cluster events for our customers in different areas of the country. We just did our Champions Conference 2 weeks ago in San Diego. So that's where all of our customers get together and discuss best practices and receive training on the software, collaborate on the product roadmap, etc. We had over 500 attendees there. We have a LinkedIn user group, etc. So again, that's just a high-level overview of Unanet as a company. Now, there's actually been several people that have joined since we started. So just to reiterate, there is a question section in the GoTo webinar console. So if you open up the GoTo webinar console, you'll see there's a questions area, and if you can put in your questions in that area, I'll periodically go over there and try to address those as we go through. And if I see a question that I'm planning on regularly addressing, I'll kind of wait and defer it until we get to that point, just to kind of continue on with the flow. But again, if you have any questions, feel free to enter those in the console. Okay, so when we're authenticating into the system, Unanet will identify who the person is, and then based on their user privileges or their roles, it will dynamically generate a dashboard type view. So as a role-based system, you can limit who can view information versus who can edit information, who has access to which customers, which projects, which departments, which employees. So when we log in, we're basically seeing a screen of what we've chosen to see combined with what we're allowed to see. So again, you can make these dashboards as simple or as sophisticated as you want. I have a lot of information on this dashboard. This is an example of a dashboard with very little information. So each of these menus across the top represents a different dashboard, and you can place the charts and reports on the various dashboards. So if I go back to this slide, planning, executing, monitoring, invoicing, accounting. If we talk about planning for a second, Unanet allows you to plan into the future your people. So when we talk to companies, a lot of people do this in Excel or really have limited visibility on their upcoming work, but this is showing us by department, by person, how people are planned to work across all engagements. So quickly, you can see who's overbooked in red, you can see who's underbooked in yellow, you can see when resources become available. You can also drill down. So there's a lot of click-through in Unanet. If we wanted to see why is Caroline overbooked, we could click on Caroline and we can see which she's booked on that make up her overbooking. So when we think about a matrix-based organization with multiple people and multiple projects, you could either view the data like this, which is basically showing by person, by project, everything Darla is on, everything David is on, everything Dustin is on, or you could invert the data similar to a pivot table concept in Excel. So instead of showing it by person, by project, you could show the same data by project, by person. Oops, wrong report. You can show the same data like this by project, by person. So everyone on 10.10.7011, everyone on 10.studyx. Or again, as we showed, you could show how they're planned across everything. So, you know, rolling up all the people and all the projects into one screen. And just to give you some sense of Unanet's reporting capabilities, it's all point and click type reporting. So if we go back to the criteria, if we wanted to update the screen, instead of showing it week over week, for example, we could change it from week over week to show month over month. So we can report obviously in different periods here. Say we wanted to look at it for 9 months. Say we want to look for certain skills. So you can identify and create skills in Unanet. So Java programming could be a skill. The Spanish language could be a skill. You know, a certain accreditation could be a skill, whether it's a CPA or a PMP or whatever. So basically, these are our 4 people with the Java programming skill and how they're planned to work for the next 9 months. So again, you can quickly see if we need somebody that has Java, Charlie is immediately available. Now, when we're doing this planning, we can plan people, as we've shown here, and these people have a bill rate, they have a cost rate, they're burdened in a certain manner, which I'll get to in a second. We can also plan what we call TBD resources or to be determined resources, or some organizations call this soft booking versus hard booking. But the basic concept is you have this list of TBDs, and then once you identify the human you want to swap the TB out for, you can basically do a double click. Like if we want to swap out this project manager for Chris Director, we can click on the project manager, find Chris Director, and then swap him out. So now that TBD plan has gone up to Chris Director. And if we look at a supply demand curve, this chart shows supply versus demand. So basically, the supply, the capacity, the purple bar is your number of humans. The demand is your plans against those humans, and then this could be TBDs or humans. But basically, you know, do we need to hire people? Do we need to reallocate people into the future? Okay, so you can forecast out people. You can also forecast out non-labor type costs. So basically here, you could have a list of direct and indirect projects. You pick the project you want to plan on, you pick the expense type, and then you put in the dollar amount, and you can forecast that out into the future. If you do that, then you can also define, and I'll walk through this quickly because I know some people are familiar with it, but you can go as far as many fiscal years into the future as you want. And then you can define different cost elements. So you can say, these are our buckets, or these are our categories for labor. These are our categories for ODCs. And then these are our categories for indirects. So again, you can define as many of these buckets as you want, and then you can use the cost structures feature to allocate these elements differently across different people and different projects. So you can have as many cost structures in the system, and then within each structure, you could say, how is labor being designated? How is ODCs being designated into these 4 buckets in this case? And then how are we calculating our indirects? So for people that are unfamiliar with indirects, just a brief overview, your fringe benefits that you want to indirectly apply to a project. These could be, 401k, vacation, insurance, etc. Your overhead. This could be your office rent that you're indirectly applying out to your projects. And the whole point in doing this is not only can you see gross margin, but you can also see your net margin on your jobs, which we'll show you in a second. The G&A, the finance team, the admin team. So, indirectly spreading this out to all your jobs. And if you do that, then when you run a report, something like this for 2020, so now we're looking at 2020, we can see all of our labor here, for one division, for one project across the entire company, however we want to report on it. We can see all of our ODCs here. And then we can see our indirects, which again are calculations based on the labor in the ODCs. But we can see if we do what we plan on doing, this is our expected revenue. This is our expected margin and percent margin, not just gross margin, not just bill rate minus cost rate, but really true margin into the future. So that's a powerful capability within Unanet. One other piece on the planning side is that we do have the revenue forecast tool, where not only can you have your active project in Unanet, but you can also have your opportunity pipeline. And you can see this in this case, the pipeline is weighted by certain percentages here. So we're expecting 6.6 million. So if we're expecting 6.6 million based on a weighted forecast, if we run this not using the probability percentage, we would expect that the forecast would be much higher, and it is. It's 9.3 million. So this 9.3 million means we're going to 100% win everything we targeted to win. And obviously that's not necessarily the case in the real world, but you can have your pipeline in Unanet with your different opportunities. And the nice thing about the single source of truth aspect is if you have your pipeline in Unanet and you win this Mars mission recompete, you can come over here and you can flip the switch and make it an open active project, and all the information around the project retained. So the period of performance, the budgeted amount, it's all stored associated with the project. You don't need to create a new entity, and you can start having people track their effort against it. Okay. So that is basically what I wanted to discuss in the forecasting / planning area. The next area is the executing area, the basic core blocking and tackling of Unanet. Question on contract briefs coming in, I will address that in this section. Another question on data security and integrity. So we have done a SOC 2 audit, and we do host at Amazon Web Services. We do have, over 1,000 customers that we're running in the cloud, and we've passed the SOC 2 audit. We have customers that have passed the NIST 171 compliance standards. Customers, if they choose, they may also run the software on their own servers if they want to run it, internally, and then manage the security themselves. All right. So executing gets into kind of the core blocking and tackling of Unanet. So if I log out as this person and I log in as an end user has very limited functionality as far as what they can and cannot do. So as part of security, we mentioned Unanet is roles-based as far as who can edit information, who can view information. There's a variety of roles that are set up in the configuration. So from an end user perspective, primarily we're logging in time, we're logging in expenses, and we can run some self-service reports. So this is an end user's timesheet. So basically they're putting in time against different projects and tasks. This is a weekly timesheet. You can do weekly, bi-weekly, semi-monthly, monthly timesheets. You can start on any day of the week you want. It doesn't have to start on Sunday. Just kind of working left to right. You can limit which codes people can see in their drop-down list. So to make it easier for the employees and also to reduce errors, this is their workforce authorization. So this is what they're authorized to charge to. If you really want to be granular about that, you can limit when they can charge to something or how much they can charge to something. So you could say, Charlie, you can charge to Space Station from May 27th to June 13th for 20 hours, and it would prevent her from charging outside that date range or prevent him from charging the 21st hour if you wanted to. Projects may or may not have tasks or subtasks underneath them, any number and level of tasks or subtasks, and all the restrictions we just mentioned at the project level can also be applied at the task level. Right now, we're only showing you 2 columns on the timesheet. You can have up to 6 columns. Some other columns could be location, where is the work being performed, labor category, what role are we acting as, project type, is it billable or non-billable, pay code, is it regular time, overtime, double time, that sort of thing. And then for each cell of time, you can put in a comment. So each cell can have its sort of free-form comments associated with it. It will pre-populate the holiday schedule if you set it up. And then you could have these comments show up on an invoice if you want. And then there are some certain rules about reporting time some companies have to adhere to, so you can't put time into the future. So for Friday, we could put in vacation on Friday, but if we try to charge to a code that's maybe a government code, it wouldn't let us charge that time in advance. And then if we go back, and change time, if we change these 2 hours on Monday to 1 hour, it forces us to put in a reason as to why we made the change. And it timestamps it with who did it, what they did, and when they did it. So when the auditors come in, there's a history report that they can look at. Question coming in: when integrating with third-party payroll providers, do employees enter time cards in your portal? Yes, so Unanet basically feeds, we have, as I mentioned, over 1,000 customers, and they've integrate with pretty much every major payroll system you've ever heard of and probably never heard of. So ADP, Ceridian, Paychex, Paylocity, PrimePay, Payroll Network, Fidelity, Millennium, TriNet, etc. So there's just a bunch out there that people use, and we don't do payroll in Unanet, but we integrate with the payroll providers. Okay, I guess the 2 things I want to stress from the timesheet are: 1, it's very intuitive to use. Everyone watching this could probably start putting in their time right now. And then 2, it's all live data. It's all real-time data. So when we get to the analytics in the next section of this, everything you see will be live. As soon as it's saved on the timesheet, it's immediately available for reporting purposes. There is also a mobile optimized timesheet. So Unanet is fully mobile enabled. We've created this mobile optimized view. This is the help documentation. So you can see what it looks like. I can't really show you a phone on the screen here, but this is kind of an emulator that shows a phone and what the real estate, how it reconfigures the page based on the real estate available. So if you have mobile employees, it's very easy for them to put in their time in this manner. The employees could also run reports on their own time. So if they wanted to see what their personal utilization was, if you're asking them to hit certain utilization targets, you can give them a tool to see how they're progressing against those targets. We also have a concept of push reporting that will allow you to push these reports out to end users on a specific basis. So every week or twice a month or whenever and however you want, Unanet will actually push out or broadcast reports out to individuals so they can, instead of relying on them to run the report, the system will ping them directly. This is a accrual details report. So this is showing them, their leave balance, what they've accrued and what they've used and what their balance is, and then what they're going to accrue into the future. So if we want to take vacation at the end of June, we'll have 79 hours available for us. And then this is a calendar report, not only what we've actually done, but, combining it into one single source of truth, what we're actually going to do into the future. So what are we planning to work on for the month of May? What are we planning to work on for the month of June or July or August, etc. Employees could also put in expense reports. So in addition to tracking their time, they can track their expenses. We have expense reports and expense requests. Requests basically are for pre-approval of expenses yet to be incurred. So if we wanted to put in an expense report or an expense request and get that approved, it would show up as an in-use expense report, and then we could log the actuals against the requested amounts. So this is going to our expense report. This is being charged to one project. You can also charge expense reports to multiple projects if you want to, but this is where you have an expense type, and you can limit which expense types go with which employees, which projects, which customers, that sort of thing. So for this $500 airfare, it's company paid. So it's still costed to the big data project. It's just not reimbursed to the employee down here. And we do have all the per diems, the CONUS and OCONUS per diem. So if you tell the system when you were there and where you were, it will tell you the appropriate reimbursable amount. And then if you go over that amount, it will actually calculate the unallowable for you and place that on a separate line. You can attach receipts to your expense report. So if you, I took this picture with my iPhone. If you have a Droid, you can use the camera on the Droid, but basically, you can attach the receipts, and then those receipts are available with every expense report. You can also bring in corporate credit card transactions. So if you had a company credit card, you'd be able to bring in your company credit card transactions and then allocate them to your different clients and your different projects. So that's kind of the gist of the end user functionality. Again, basically putting in time, putting in expenses. There is a approval workflow around that, and this really is kind of the same workflow for whether it's a timesheet, an expense report, a purchase order, whatever it is. They have an approval queue, and they can go into their approval queue and see all their primary approvals, and they can go in and they can review what was charged. They can either approve it or disapprove it. If they disapprove it, it'll force them to put in a reason as to why it was disapproved. And it sends an email back to the employee. The email, contains those links to the mobile timesheet or the regular timesheet, and then they click on the link and it brings them directly into their timesheet. The question coming in: is there an option? There's a mobile option for employees to enter expenses. Yes, there is a mobile option for employees to enter expenses. So again, Unanet is fully mobile enabled. You can get to everything I'm showing here directly through an iPhone or a Droid or Windows mobile device or a tablet. It doesn't matter what the platform is. This is a chart that shows kind of the where it is in the approval process. So, if you want to see who your 5 delinquent people are, you could click on this slice of the pie and you could see who those delinquent people are. There's also a nice report that shows kind of description of the approval process. So we have different types of approvers in Unanet. The manager would approve the entire timesheet or the entire expense report of anyone that submits to their group. And you can turn that on or off on a project, but you can have hierarchical manager approvers. So first of all, you can go to manager A, then B, then C, or for expenses, manager A could approve up to $5,000, manager B could approve up to $10,000, etc. For project approvers, it's more on a line item basis, so they only see time or expenses charged to their particular projects. So in this case, when Chad User submitted his timesheet, Chris Director is his kind of functional line manager, but he charged to a project where George Washington is the project manager. So in this case, his timesheet work would require both approvals. You can also have your customers do approvals as well. Okay. All right. So if I log out as this person, log in as the next person. This is a question that came in. This is kind of a contract brief report. So I was saving this question to show you kind of how you can generate a contract brief. But all of this comes up with the setup. So when you set up, this is a list of projects that could roll up to a contract. And if you go into one of these, this is where you'll have your period of performance, your budgeted information, your funded value, your total value. If we're not tracking something you want to track, you can create user-defined fields. So these user-defined fields can be text, tick lists, numbers, dates, but you could say, it's required for drug testing, or it's not subject to SCA or something like that. And then you can include these in all the reports. You can also attach documents. So if you actually have like a contract award or a RFP or something like that, you can attach those as files here to the contract. And then you'd be able to run a report, something like this. This is a backlog report that basically shows you, by project or by contract, incurred against budgeted amount, and then incurred against funded value. So where are you operating at risk? How much effort do you have left to expend? The variance there can either be based on actuals or it can be based on actuals plus plans. Okay, so just kind of moving on in the sense of time in this monitoring area, this gets into all the analytics and the dashboard. So just to walk you through a few. So this is basically probably the most simplistic report you could get out of Unanet. This is showing budget versus actuals and the variance between the two. Again, very simplistic. You could also set alerts that will ping you when certain thresholds are hit. So instead of having to run that report, just ping us when we hit 75% of the funded value. And it will ping us with an email, and it will also show up in our dashboard when we log into the system. Up here, you have unread project performance alerts, so you can see everything that's triggered since you last checked it there. And then you can also take into account percent complete. So based on the percent complete for the current period and for the life of the project, this is what we've planned to do. This is the portion of the budget that falls within the start date of the project to the run date of this report. This is what we've actually accomplished. This is the earned value. This is the percent complete multiplied by the budget. This is what it's costed us to get here. And then if we look at the far right column, it's basically saying if we continue at our current rate, this is how we're expected to finish, either under or over budget. So a lot of our customers run this at their weekly or bi-weekly management meetings to determine where they need to focus their efforts. This is a utilization report. We talked about utilization from an employee perspective. This is from a manager's perspective. There's different ways you can define utilization. So in this case, we took billable time in the numerator. You can choose whatever project types you want in your system. We could take bid and proposal time as well in the numerator if we want to consider that utilized. We can exclude certain pay codes like pay time off. A lot of companies take that out of both the numerator and the denominator. We can say in the denominator, use the business week hours. So each person in the system can have a number of hours associated with their person profile as their business week, i.e. 40 hours a week. It could be 30 hours a week. It could be 50 hours a week, whatever you want. And then you can say, when do we want to look at this? We can look at it starting in July of last year. And we run the report, and it's showing you kind of month over month utilization by team, by person, in aggregate, etc. Now, again, since Unanet is all one system, it's all one database, you can also forecast the utilization. So, for example, if we wanted to start on Jan 1 and look at actuals and plans on the same report, we can combine those using actuals through today and plans as of tomorrow. So when we run this, the asterisk represents the actuals. So A asterisk actuals, P plans plus, and we're using actuals from the timesheet through today and plans as of tomorrow. So this is all historical data through April. May is mostly historical data, but does have a few days of plans in it. So that's the asterisk and the plus. And then beyond today's date is all forecasted data. So we can see, again, everything in one single system, actuals and plans. Another way to think about that is in a sense of dollars. So this is kind of a traditional job summary report where we're looking at by project, we're looking at our labor, we're looking at our ODCs, we're looking at our indirects. Again, we described the importance of indirects earlier, so we can see our true net margin on our projects. And again, if you wanted to see, what made up this $33,000 in labor, we can click through and drill down and we can see who charged and how much they charged and what made up that number. So again, there's a lot of click-through within the system. Now, this is kind of good for one project manager, but if we were someone responsible for multiple projects, we may want to take this data and flip it on its side, and we could look at something like this that's showing basically by division, by project, the same data elements. And over here we could see, margin by project, margin by division, and then total margin down here. So it's kind of a quick way to look at the data. You can actually define what these columns are, or what you want them to be. So if we wanted to run a more simplistic report that we call, margin summary, now we're showing revenue first. So, we moved it around in the report, but instead of showing it last, now we're showing revenue first. And then we're seeing our gross margin on the jobs compared with our net margin. And again, why is net margin important? Well, project manager could come to you and say, hey, we're doing terrific. We're making $47,000 on this job, just kind of bill rate minus cost rate, or billable amount minus cost amount, direct cost. But when you take into account, again, all the fringe, the overhead, and the G&A, you're actually losing $35,000 on the job in this particular example. And you can come up with columns that show average bill rate, target bill rate, labor multiplier, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, one final report I'll show here is this one. So this is, again, using that combination of actuals and plans in the same screen. We're looking at revenue, cost, and margin. The bars here are measured on the left-hand side of the y-axis. The lines are cumulative numbers measured on the right-hand side of the y-axis. So if our funded value is around 200,000 in this case, we can see based on our actuals and our plans, when we're projected to cross that $200,000 barrier in February of 2020. And we can also look at 75% of that would be down here, 150,000. So 60 days in advance of the 75 would be over here. If you need to notify someone based on certain thresholds, you can see based on your actuals, based on your plans, when you're expected to cross those thresholds. So the idea is not for the project manager to live inside of Unanet. The idea is for them to get in, make their updates, plan people on projects, see the impact of those updates, and then get out and then do the work for the customer, communicate for the customer. So, they're constantly in front of the customer with the appropriate data to properly communicate. Okay, there's really a ton of reports I could show by client, by project, by department, by employee over a variety of different date ranges. However, I'm just going to stop there because I need to get through the last two pieces here, billing and revenue recognition. So, question coming in on developing PBRs, if you could just spell out that acronym. I'm not familiar with that one, but if you could spell it out, I'll try to relate to that one. In the meantime, this is a report that shows what we've billed versus what we've recognized in revenue. So for a time and materials type engagement, it's going to be the same thing, effectively. What you bill is what you recognize. In most cases. For cost plus, you may, there's different ways you can recognize. So you could bill based on your provisional rates and then recognize based on your actual rates. And then you'd have a variance here in this deferred column. So you either owe the client money or the client owes you money. And then Unanet will do the true up at the end of the year automatically, but that could account for the difference between what you billed versus what you've recognized for cost plus. For fixed price, you could also have a difference. So for fixed price, if we go into a fixed price engagement, we can bill a certain amount And then for this 48,000, we can either recognize the revenue when we bill it, which is kind of, typically QuickBooks type recognition. If we want it to be GAAP compliant, we would either recognize based on % complete, or we would recognize based on a custom schedule, in which case we'd spread that $48,000 into the future. And if we needed to move money around, we'd move money around down there. But if we're recognizing based on % complete, the project has a % complete field associated with it. So if you give us a % complete, we're going to use the % complete. If we do not give Unanet a % complete, Unanet will calculate the % complete based on the hours or the dollars. So that's how that works there. And again, this is showing you what's been billed and what's been recognized in revenue. And then as far as the billing goes, you can set up different invoice formats. So you can have as many different invoice formats as you want. And then you can apply these formats to your different customers and your different projects. Within each format, we call this a WYSIWYG. What you see is what you get. So the left-hand side controls the right-hand side. The left-hand side, if you make changes on the left-hand side, it will impact what the right-hand side looks like. So this allows you to see a template of what the invoice is going to look like before you actually send it to the customer. So if we wanted to add the comments we put in on the timesheet to the T&M section, we click on refresh preview, and then we see where the comments show up over here. So again, you can have as many different invoice formats as you want, and then you can apply those to your different customers and your different projects. And then, depending on the level of access you want to give people, you could give people access to what we call this control panel report that shows you by project, for the current period, actual versus budget, year to date, etc. You can drill into other reports from here, but you can also come over here and you can see the AR balance. And then if they had a question about the AR balance, they could, click through and drill down, and they could actually see the invoices that they're, are overdue in a certain manner here. Because again, it's all one system, it's all one database. So again, the click through allows you to get to the different areas more quickly and save time. Okay, so moving on here, the accounting area, general ledger, accounts payable. I'm sorry, question coming in. Oh yeah, tools for developing provisional billing rates. Yes, I'll show that actually under accounting. And there is a way to generate the 1034 invoice format in the Knowledge Center. So I'll just put the link for that in the chat. So it's going to it would take me too long to walk through that in the 12 minutes that I have left. So this is the Knowledge Center. This is kc.unanet.com. This is publicly available. If you wanted to go into kc.unanet.com and then just search on 1034, 1035, you can do that. I will put the link in the Knowledge Center if you wanted to, if you're interested in that. So as far as the financials goes, if we go under admin, well, first of all, let me back up a little bit. So again, what I've been talking about, I've referenced several times, is that Unanet is all role-based. So these are all the people in the system. Each person belongs to a department over here. And if we go into a person's profile, these are all the fields around a person: first name, last name, email address, etc. You can dump and export and import this data in Excel very easily. If we go into the roles section under the financials area, there's basically different sets of financial documents. And if we look at AP and AR and GL, they're basically the same set of roles for each of the financial documents. So we have a user, and then we have a poster. And a user is one that can create and submit the document, and then a poster is someone that posts the document. So for separation of duties purposes, we're timestamping who did what when. It's all recorded in the system. And then these roles can also be specific to certain organizations. So for example, if someone can view a P&L report, they may only be able to view it for the consulting services group or the government services group, or they could review it across the entire company. So this is where you're restricting who has access to what. We do have a question coming in on single sign-on. We do have single sign-on capability for SAML 2.0. and also Active Directory if they're running it on premise. SAML is kind of the standard for cloud single sign-on. So Unanet is a SAML consumer. There are products like OneLogin and Okta and Google Authentication, etc., that are the SAML providers. Okay, so just quickly here, if we go in and we run a report on a cost pool hierarchy with our chart of accounts, this is an example of a chart of accounts, but they're grouped into this hierarchy from a cost pool perspective. So these are all the accounts that roll up into Fringe. So if we're defining our cost pools here, we can have as many cost pool groups as we want. And then, you can have as many legal entities in Unanet as you want. And then within each group, you can have as many pools as you want. So the order you see them here is the order in which they'll calculate. And you could also have, what if type scenarios. What if we added 50% to our employees? How is that going to affect our Fringe? But if we go into the Fringe pool, this shows you what's in the numerator and what's in the denominator. And again, since we're taking 60 Fringe expenses here in the numerator, we don't need to take all the sub accounts underneath Fringe. It's smart enough to go in and grab them and put them into that calculation. So we don't need to add all of those here. And if we added a new account, it would just automatically show up here. So if we do our financials cost pool calculation, we can calculate these rates based on our actuals. And you remember I showed the screen where we have an ability to store a target rate, a provisional rate, and an actual rate for each cost structure for each fiscal year. So we can, calculate our actuals. We can also calculate our forward rates based on our budgets. So if we're doing reforecasting mid-year, we could do that. If we have a budget in the system, we can calculate based on the budgets, but that would basically be your provisional billing rates and how it would calculate those rates based on your forward budgets. So we can do both. If we calculate our standard cost pool here, it runs through its process. Green is good. And then this is showing us our rates. So we have basically a 30% Fringe rate. So how did we get that rate? Well, we got it because these are all the accounts that were in the numerator. These are all the accounts that were in the denominator. And again, you can kind of keep clicking through. If the auditor is over your shoulder and they said, show us your labor, what made up that 191,000, you can kind of keep drilling down and show the details of everything that made up the 191,000. But that is how Unanet will calculate your rates. There's also a report called our Statement of Indirect Rate Report that shows you everything on one screen. And I'll shrink it down here. Hopefully you can see that all right. But basically it's showing you all of your accounts, the dollar value in each account that's clickable, and then for each of your pools, going across the top here, what's in the numerator, what's in the denominator, the rate that's being calculated down here. This one's a service center. It's an intermediate pool. There's no rate associated with it. But then you can see the 196,000 that's coming out of Fringe is then showing up in the base of overhead and the base of G&A, etc. And then most importantly, if you go over to the far right, you can see everything that was used in the numerator, everything that was used in the denominator, and for whatever reason, anything that was not used. So if it was not used, it would show up here, and you'd want to understand why it's showing up there. But if it's unallowable, that's okay that it's showing up there. From a reporting perspective, we have all the standard reports for accounts payable aging activity, accounts receivable aging activity, GL details, bank reconciliation, a balance sheet, an income statement, a trending income statement, etc. Just to show you kind of a financial transaction, I guess. This is the AP dashboard. So if we look at our in-use vouchers, this is a AP voucher. So we have a vendor invoice. We have payment terms that default to the vendor. Obviously, we have a due date that's required. If you pay early, maybe you get a discount. You can do recurring vouchers. So if you have something like rent or something like that, you can have that here. You can also attach documents to the vouchers. So if you have a vendor invoice, you want to take a picture of that and scan it in, you can store that electronically within Unanet as, retained in the system. One other thing too is when you're putting in expenses, we're designating accounts as whether or not they require a project. So if we put in, and it has this Google-like feature, you'll notice we start typing, if we put in direct travel, that one requires a project over here, so we have to put in a project associated with that, whereas this G&A other did not require a project. So I'm trying to bubble this up now. So again, we walked through planning, executing, doing the work, running a variety of analytics on the plans and how the execution is progressing against the plans, the billing and the rev rec for the customers, and then the accounting. So setting up the chart of accounts, calculating indirect rates, journal entries work very similar manner to accounts payable, and cash receipts obviously the same. There are some other questions coming in, so I'll spend the balance of the 4 minutes we have left trying to answer those questions. But if you have any questions, please feel free to submit those in the console, and we'll try to address those as they come in on any of the areas in Unanet. And I wanted to get back to this. I showed this in the very beginning, but this is kind of what one of our customers sent us on, very simplistic chart on the value of having everything in one system, in one database, because before they had, a general ledger system that was separate from their time tracking system, that was separate from their expense reporting system, that was separate from their budgeting process, that was also separate from their reporting monitoring process. They had 8 or 9 Excel spreadsheets open on their desk at all times. So they've been able to significantly scale their business after going live with Unanet in mid-2016. All right, questions. Can you talk about how you price for small business, or have someone set an appointment with you? So yeah, at a high level, the way we license this is based on the number of in the cloud. I'll talk about the cloud because most people use the cloud these days. Is basically a per resource per month model, and we do have different functionality in Unanet. So, for example, if you just wanted to use the time tracking piece, it's all one product, it's all one system. It's just you can license it separately. Give me a second here. Trying to find the here are the different license types. So there's obviously different functionality. What we went through today was project portfolio financials, which is what most people are running. There's just kind of subsets of that functionality for whatever reason. But the time starts at about $12 per employee per month. Portfolio financials is about $36 per employee per month. So if you think about a 10-person firm, small business, be about $360 a month. As the number of licenses goes up, the price per license goes down. So there are, several tiers. If you're a 100-person organization, you pay less than a 10-person organization on a per resource per month basis. If you're a 1,000-person organization, you pay less than the 100-person organization, et cetera, et cetera. So there are different, licensing options, and then, pricing is based on number of users. The other point there is, you have different capabilities across the different features. But yes, we can certainly have somebody reach out to you on the pricing. So yeah, if they were using a third-party general ledger, they would run one of these systems. But most of the customers that are running Unanet have chosen to do everything again within the single source of truth. So they run Unanet with our own financial system, just to avoid data reconciliation effort. All right, any other questions? I appreciate everyone's time today. I want to be respectful of your schedule, so thank you very much for your time. If you do have any questions, I'll put my email up, and feel free to email me and try to get you information. Thank you very much, and have a great day.